And same goal, but an evolution of identities and variations of identities. Now, he gives an example, it's a great example. He says, man decides to become a smoker. He gets married, and his wife objects to his becoming a smoker, so now he has an opposition known as a wife. So he assumes an identity which is a dominating husband in order to handle the identity wife. But now there's a new identity that shows up, which is called the Ladies' Aid Society, or, you know, the Feminist Society. And his wife has joined that, and their combined forces are now going to get him to stop smoking. So now he has to become a wealthy, independent individual to maintain his self-determinism. And the Ladies' Aid Society, not to be outdone, allies themselves with the AMA, who's now saying that smoking causes cancer, so you better stop. And so now the AMA, of course, aligns himself with the government, so now he has to become a political genius in order to and join Congress so he can oppose the AMA.
Wow.
And he says, and that's about the highlight of the whole thing, and it sort of deteriorates from there. But it's all based on this responsibility scale, which I'll show you a little bit here. See, the thing is that this happens all the time with people. People change their identities or assume variations of beingnesses in order to handle various situations. But it's very rare for one of these problems to become, almost always they're unbalanced, so they don't persist. It's actually very rare for one of these problems to become so balanced that they float in time. And when you consider the trillions and trillions and trillions of years that you've been around, there's really a limited, it's in the thousands. LRH at one point says that you wouldn't have more than 23,000 GPMs. It's not a lot. But it's not one every lifetime or several every lifetime. But you get one of these one of these GPMs with a lot of energy in it that's balanced and hangs up in time, and that becomes one of your GPMs. It's a massive problem that you're trying to solve over many, many lifetimes. But anyway, here's the responsibility scale. And the top of the scale is no previous or current contact. So before you enter into a game, there's no game. At least for you. There's no liability to it. Once you enter a game, there's responsibility and there's liability. The first step of a game, as I say, is the thing makes a postulate, and then he assumes an identity. And once you've assumed an identity, once you've decided to be something, by definition, you've also decided not to be something else. So whatever you are, you're not something else. Now, abilities, valences always have abilities, things they can do and things they can't do. But in order to have a game, you see, you jump into a game, you have to leave this side of the game uncontrolled. You can control this side of the game and you have allies, but you leave this side of the game uncontrolled. And that's where originally you're responsible for the whole game because you envisioned the game and you postulated it, but then you jump in and have an identity, and that is where pan-determinism deteriorates. See, originally the word other determinism meant that you've decided that there's some other determinism in the game other than yourself. It doesn't mean controlled by the other. It originally just meant abandoning an area of the game to control. So somebody else is controlling that. So somebody else is controlling that side of it. Then, of course, you're here, you're self-determined, you're putting some action over in this direction and you're getting some action in this direction. You know, you've got painful things that you're giving, and you've got painful things that you're receiving in the game. And you're not willing to experience those effects, and really you're not willing to experience those effects either. So this becomes mysterious to you, and sort of a vacuum because you're withholding yourself from that end. So eventually you sort of flip over and become that side of the equation, and you become the thing that you oppose. And then the whole cycle kind of flips back again, but it doesn't flip back exactly the same. It flips back like this. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, over a long period of time, until you get down here. And what that is, that's like total failure, total stop. And so, if he takes a look at that, what the? I don't like this at all. I'm going to play a new game. I have an even better idea. I'm going to be an entirely new person. What about this thing over in the corner here? No, we didn't remember anything about that. So all that knowingness, all that memory is now over there. Now he's still creating it, but he's no longer controlling it. He doesn't even remember it. So what does it become? It becomes a valence that goes on automatic. So if the game was war, then when he's confronted with a situation where there's war, one of these valences will kick in. Because what's a valence? Valence is simply a substitute for self taken on after the fact of lost confidence in self. Once you lose confidence in your ability to handle a situation or play a game, you set up a valence to do it. Once that valence fails, it goes on automatic, but then it sort of activates automatically anyway, and you start handling things the way that valence would handle. And that's how, where you get these how people act differently in different situations. They're not consistent in their personality or the way they handle life. Now, when you audit these things, they'll just blow. And what is the blows? It could be like hundreds of lifetimes. See, that's why you can't really run it out dianetically, because it isn't an incident. It's a whole bunch of collapsed incidents. And not only a bunch of collapsed incidents, it's a bunch of collapsed identities. It isn't even just one identity. It's all these things locked in like that. In other words, it describes them as like kind of like gray masses and things like that. And the remarkable thing about the L's is that you can get them to come up at all because you've forgotten about them. You've buried them deep. And I remember we were running something on L12. It was called a character rundown. It was a very fascinating rundown. It's a list of identities. It's a prepared list of identities that are very early on the track that a being reacted to, and it formed his basic personality.
Wow.
And it's a very interesting and in some ways obscure list. You really have to look up some words and figure out what the hell these things are. But and the thing is to spot where the stimulator was connected with him. So I remember we were auditing something. Something came up like a goat. A reading item, a goat. Okay, so I get the question, okay, what past identity was a goat? I was out like a light. I was like at the bottom of some pit, and I couldn't even, and I had to really strain to even think of what the question was. I couldn't think of an answer. And all of a sudden, something, I could see something kind of foreign there, and well, what was it? I mean, these concepts, these thought concepts, they're not in English, but it's an energy. So can you identify what is that energy? you know, and so you start to list, and so, you know, it could be this, is it this, no, this, you're listing and nulling, and all of a sudden, an angry policeman, you know, all the unconsciousness blew, and it's still what the hell, but nevertheless, the win was, all right, that's what it was. And here comes the next question: who or what would oppose an angry policeman? A sneaky thief, you know? I don't know, but anyway. Well, you know, you do this. I mean, I think we did something like 800 listing and nulling actions, because you're doing like 6, 7 an hour, and I did about 120 hours on it. It was very thorough. These things do exist. They're there. It's hard to get them to come up sometimes. Sometimes they're just on the surface and they blow. But see, valence is a synthetic beingness, and it isn't necessarily a real person, but it's maybe what you thought that person was. And it's a package of characteristics. It has a complete bank. As I said, it knows something very well. It knows it better than you do. It solves a problem. That's very important. That's why they're kind of hard to blow sometimes, because you see, this thing is solving this thing. If you blow this thing, you got this problem now, so you got to blow this, then you got to blow that. And then the whole thing blows. And Elroy says, look, this is not a permanent solution. 200 trillion years from now, you're going to have a few of these things. But once they unravel like that, you can't put them back together, even if you wanted to, but you don't. And but not only that, but you know, it's almost hard to, how did we get there, and what was that, and you know, who was that masked man, you know?